of the largest human rights organization working in Zimbabwe. So I worked for that organization for almost 3 years. And then I realized that, conflict, most of the human rights violations that were happening, that we're encountering in Zimbabwe, um, the, the, the genesis of most of that was because of the conflict that we had. So I started, you know, this drive to just study conflict, and also to find out how a conflict and these human rights violations that were happening are connected. So I was lucky enough to um, to get a scholarship, to study in the United Kingdom, to study conflict and security in the United Kingdom. So in 2010, I left Zimbabwe and was in the United Kingdom for 2 years, doing my master's in conflict, security, and development. When I returned to Zimbabwe in 2012, I joined one of the largest umbrella organizations in Zimbabwe. So that job gave me an opportunity to interact with a lot of organizations that were working in human rights and peace building. I was the Human Rights and Governance Program Officer. So that role gave me a huge opportunity to not only to interact with organizations that were working on the ground with communities, but actually to meet communities that were affected by the conflicts that were happening in Zimbabwe. You would know that in Zimbabwe in 2008, we had some of the worst violence that has ever been witnessed in this country, in Zimbabwe, following disputed elections. So there was a huge drive to try to address some of the underlying root causes of the conflict in Zimbabwe. Of course, the conflict triggered by elections. So I think, that time, I had the opportunity now to be exposed to peace building. And surprising enough, I was approached by Envision Zimbabwe. This organization, a group of women from different backgrounds that had been meeting for quite some time. And these women from different backgrounds, academia, arts and theater, human rights. Some of them had been in government, working for the government, and some of them were in the opposition, one of the biggest opposition parties in Zimbabwe. So this diverse group of women approached me, and they thought I was a good fit for Envision Zimbabwe to lead this women's organization. For me, it was a huge challenge because we have a very vibrant women's rights movement in Zimbabwe, and um, I, as a man, I felt that this space that I was going to fill in, um, you know, um, came with a lot of responsibility. Um, but I took the challenge. So in 2013, I became the executive director of Envision Zimbabwe Women's Trust. It has been a great journey. I've learned so much as a man, working on women's rights, advancing gender equality, trying to create space for women to participate in so many processes that are taking place in Zimbabwe. I think that's that's what I can say for now.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being a real feminist and a real ally. Anyway, I also know you have very strong women on your board and the founders of the organization, who I'm sure keep you honest and in check. So, as I mentioned, it's been a while since we've seen each other, and a lot has changed in the world. I wonder if you could just update us on the situation in Zimbabwe, particularly COVID, the impacts of COVID on communities there, on women and girls. How is that affecting you and your work? And anything else about the situation you want to let us know about?
Okay. Thank you, Bridget. Um, I think when we met in Washington, one of the things that we discussed about was the elections that had just taken place in 2018 in Zimbabwe. And as you know, the elections were followed by violence, and people were killed in the streets. And when we met in Washington, I think the biggest question that I explained that the biggest question that most Zimbabweans had was, what is it going to be like for the next 5 years? I think during that time, there was a lot of optimism post the Mugabe regime. So there was a lot of optimism that things might change. Um, you know, um, but now, the beginning of 2020 and COVID-19, there's, I think, most of the things that we're worried about, most of the things, our fears, um, I think for me, our fears were realized. We thought that the new government that would come in would try to address some of the long-standing challenges that Zimbabwe has been facing. Unfortunately, uh, the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic sort of amplified most of the things that had already started going wrong. From service delivery, the issue of human rights, democracy. Remember, we had just had these disputed elections. Um, all that came together, and basically, I think 2020 we had a complex humanitarian emergence, because we suddenly realized that our health system that had been collapsing, that had collapsed for years, was not going to assist anyone with the virus, with the pandemic. Um, our economic collapse was not going to allow our government to respond to this crisis. Um, we, like all the countries, our government imposed a lockdown. They took these, they imposed these restrictions on people in a bid to try and limit the spread of the virus in Zimbabwe. Um, it's it's it was one of the most, I think, it was devastating. That move was devastating. We all knew that we wanted to save lives, to prevent the spread of this virus, but given the situation with our economy, where almost 95% of the population works in the informal sector, and livelihoods, all these people that were, realizing their livelihoods from, you know, either selling, tomatoes or vegetables, or doing, buying and selling in the streets, all that came to a halt. And, you know, um, there was this desperation. The government set up a fund to try to support, families that were affected by the lockdown. Um, but because of the perennial challenges that the country has with corruption, I think almost like 20 to 30% of the population managed to access this fund. You know, so this situation has really, I think from March 2020 until now, we have been in the grip of, of this challenge and the intersection of a collapsing economy, the pandemic. Right now we are in our second lockdown, and so many people have lost their lives from the virus. The hospitals are overwhelmed. Our nurses and doctors, the health professionals, are struggling to just get basic protective equipment to respond, to people who are being admitted to our hospitals. So it has been a huge challenge. There's a general feeling that our government also took advantage of the situation to advance their own agenda as well. So we have had a lot of human rights activists being arrested or detained, and because of the lockdown, most of the civil society groups and NGOs that usually respond to these crises when they happen have not been able to actually go out and engage communities and address some of these challenges that we are facing. So yeah, since our last meeting, things have been really tough for Zimbabwe. I don't think for now, the situation doesn't look as if there's any improvement.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Anyway, it sounds like it must be a very difficult situation. How has it been for your work and the peace building work that Envision's involved in? Have there been any ways that you've been trying to respond, or any new initiatives, given the situation?
So as a small organization working in Zimbabwe, when the pandemic, when we had this outbreak of COVID-19 in Zimbabwe, and the government imposed the lockdown, like all the other non-governmental organizations, we couldn't carry on with our work. All of a sudden, we had to rethink all our projects, all our initiatives. Most of our projects are in the rural parts of Zimbabwe, where there are poor roads, there's no electricity, access to internet is very limited. So we have had to sit down and try to think how best we could carry on with our work. In other countries, technology has really kicked in, with peace builders, finding ways of continuing or staying in touch, basically, with the communities and beneficiaries of their projects. But for us, it was a huge challenge. We were lucky enough that our funding partners were understanding and flexible enough. We had to sit down with them and redo almost most of our project documents to try to channel resources, and use the resources that we had effectively, both in addressing, not only addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, but also to continue the peace building work that we were doing. So one of the one of the things that we had to do was we had to quickly mainstream COVID-19 awareness into all our projects. So, whenever we got, access and permission from government to go and do our field work, we had to make sure that both our staff and also the beneficiaries of our projects, the participants to our training workshops, were safe. So we had to train ourselves how best to protect ourselves from the virus. We had also to negotiate with our funding partners to avail additional resources to buy protective equipment for staff. So things like masks, hand sanitizers, and all those things that we had to put all of a sudden to put in place to make sure that we could continue with our work. We also had to rethink how best to deliver most of our work. I've talked about the area that we are working in, not having electricity and also having a patchy mobile network. So we had to get in touch with our communities to discuss with them how we could stay in touch. Over the years, one of the things that we have managed to do as an organization was ensuring that the communities that we've been working with are able to take ownership of the work that we've been doing. So we have these mechanisms that we have put in place to ensure that there's no violence or to respond to violence when there's an outbreak of violence. So our peace committees that we established, access to traditional courts. So all these individuals that are sitting in these mechanisms that we have established over the years, we had to get in touch with them, try to make sure that via WhatsApp, these social media platforms, we could continue, offering technical support to these groups so that they can continue ensuring that there's no violence in the communities that we work with.
Thank you. I know how important that both the flexibility for funding is in times like this, and I hope one of the lessons the world learns is how important that flexible funding is for local peace building, and also the digital support and the tech support. I know that's been so important for so many groups over the past year. Sometimes it can be hard for people to really envision what this work looks like. And I wonder if you have a particular story from the work or from a program or a success story that you'd like to share to give people a kind of a visual concept of it a little bit more. And we also had someone actually ask, could you explain the geographic location where you work in terms of Zimbabwe and the borders of it too, just to help people really know about the work you're doing?
Okay. So I'll start with the geographical location of where we've been working for the past, I think, 6 to 9 years. Our projects are in Hurungwe district. Hurungwe district is in Mashonaland West province of Zimbabwe. So this is in the western part of Zimbabwe, if you are familiar with the Zimbabwe map. Hurungwe district, where we have our projects, is about 350 kilometers from Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. It's close to the Zambian border. It's one of the remote areas that we work in. It's also one of the areas that experienced most of the political violence that happened in 2008. So it's an area that is where there's a lot of contestation, political contestation between the current government, the current political party in government, and the opposition, the biggest opposition party in Zimbabwe. So this also explains why we have been working in that area and trying to address the cycle of violence that always happens during elections in Urungwe. In terms of peace building, for Envision Zimbabwe Women's Trust, we are a women's organization. So I often say to people that we use conflict transformation as a tool to advance the promotion of women's rights, gender equality, women empowerment, and peace building for us is basically, we see it as a vehicle of achieving our goal. As an organization, we always try to identify why the fights, the violence, the causes of the violence that will be happening, and how best to address those violence, that violence. So you'll find that for us, peace building is all encompassing. So within our programs, you'd find that we have a water and sanitation project, because we suddenly we discovered that at rural community level, women and the girl child are the ones that often they have to go out and fetch water and provide water. They are the ones that ensure that there is enough food at home. And as a women's organization, we felt that we needed to address that. We also we have conflict transformation projects that we have. So the Zimbabwean society being a patriarchal society, and at rural community level, where the traditional leaders have so much power and control of what happens at that level, we decided to come up with a traditional leaders conflict transformation project that basically seeks to capacitate traditional leaders with skills and knowledge about conflicts and how best they can address those conflicts. We also realized that the security sector in Zimbabwe plays a key role in terms of what happens whenever there's violence. So we've come up with a project that tries to build relations between the police and the communities and the traditional leaders. So you'll find that peace building for us addresses, it's a way of addressing so many things. We realize that as long as there's conflict at community level, we will not be able to implement developmental projects. We will not be able to address gender equality. We will not be able to ensure that women and the girl child are protected. So that's the way we view peace building. I think one of the stories that I can share with you that that basically keeps us going whenever I think about why we as an organization we are working in this area is that in our traditional leaders project we were training a group of traditional leaders in Urungwe. So basically we're talking about what is conflict and different types of conflict and how best as traditional leaders and people who hold power, how traditional leaders can address all these conflicts that were happening. So after that training, I think a week after our training, one of the traditional leaders approached us, and they were saying, following your training, my marriage has improved so much. I no longer have fights with my wife. You know, um, you know, for us, when we delivered our training, when we had a session on negotiation and mediation, we never thought that our these traditional leaders would take the knowledge and some of the things that were discussed when we were trying to address political violence. We never thought they would take this and apply it at household level in their own lives. Um, we suddenly realized that sometimes there are these unexpected positive developments attributable to a work you never have thought that could happen. So we now know that the mediation skills that we teach and deliver to some of the community leaders, um, you know, is now being applied in trying to address domestic violence that happens at community level, and the intersection of that with some of our primary motivation, like addressing gender-based violence. We've suddenly realized that peace building can address all these other things that as a women's organization we want to address in Zimbabwe.
That's a great story, and I think you're also pointing to how peace building really is something that works personally, community, society level, and all of those levels matter so much and are interconnected too. We're getting some questions in the chat box, so I want to move on and wrap up my. I could ask you questions all day anyway, but I want to respect our participants. They're sending in a number of questions. So just before I do that, a reminder. I don't need to remind because I think people are doing it, but do post your questions in the chat box or the Q&A box, and you can email to hello@peacedirect.org as well. So just maybe one last question anyway, and building on your last comment, you said it's that story helps you keep going with the work that you do, and peace building work it's risky, it's difficult, there's challenges, and everyone's feeling a lot of uncertainty and turmoil in the world. What is something right now that gives you hope?
So I love history. I'm a student of history, and I growing up, and I've always I'm always trying to read as much as possible about history, the history of Zimbabwe, the history of Africa, the history of the world. And one of the things that that really gives me hope and sort of drives me and keeps me going, and I think this also applies to Envision Zimbabwe as an organization, is the fact that when you look back into history, we have gone through so much difficulties. If you look back into history, you look what happened in the Second World War, where there were these huge human rights violations. So many people lost their lives. So many bad things happened. But I think the human spirit and the idea that good always overcomes evil. It sort of gives me hope. At the moment in Zimbabwe, everyone is solo. There's a lot of talk about the responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. At international levels, there is talk about the new vaccines that are coming in. But for Africa and for a country like Zimbabwe, where basically almost we are almost like a failed state, we have suddenly realized that all these things, even the vaccines might not get to us maybe until 2024, so we have to continue. We have to carry on. We have to carry on. We have to soldier on and adjust and adapt to the new operating environment that we now live in. But the idea that good always overcomes, and looking through history, what we've as humanity we have been able to achieve, that sort of really keeps me going.
Thank you so much anyway, and your work and your commitment and your hope gives me hope and keeps me going too. Oscar, are we ready for questions? I know there's a lot, so feel free to ask a couple or however you want to offer the questions we have.
Great, thank you anyway, and thank you, Bridget. We've got lots of questions so far, actually. So as you suggest, I think I'll try and ask related questions all at the same time. So we've got a question in from Gemma, who would like to know anyway, in your opinion or in your experience, what opportunities, if any, has the pandemic provided for local peace building? And related to that, Ryan would like to know, what is your #1 priority for 2021, moving through the rest of and beyond the pandemic?
Thank you, Oscar. I think for the first question, so one of the silver lining, I think, of all this with what has happened with COVID-19 is that it has forced us as a peace building organization, as a women's organization, to rethink about how we interact with communities, how we do our work. I talked about the fact that we, at the moment there are barriers to accessing communities because of the lockdowns that we have. So one of the things that we think it's an opportunity or a silver lining in this very dark cloud is the fact that empowering communities to take ownership, to be the agents of what they want to see when it comes to violence prevention and ensuring that there's peace at community level. At the moment, we are 350 kilometers from the communities that we work in here in Harare. And over the last 12 or so months, conflicts have continued. Gender-based violence has continued at community level, which means that as NGOs, as an organization, we should be seen to do more in ensuring that there is sustainability of our projects, such that if we are not able to be there physically, your work, you have capacitated your communities enough such that they can carry on. And so one of the things that we are happy about as an organization is knowing that all the violence prevention mechanisms that we have created all these years are kicking in. We try, to keep in touch via mobile phones, to just finding out how our peace committees are getting on, how the traditional courts are getting on, how are they handling conflicts, even in our absence as an organization. So going forward, I think when we are designing our projects, we will ensure that we put a lot of emphasis in building resilience in the communities that we are working in, such that even when we are not there, we know that they will take charge, they will be responsible for their own safety as communities. And then in terms of the second question on priorities for 2021, I think one of the things that we really are trying to work on is trying to see how technology is going to help us to continue with our work, given the challenges that we have. We don't, the rural communities that we work in, they don't have the infrastructure that you need if you are going to use or utilize technology to do or to implement peace building activities. So the other day with my team, we were sitting down and we're thinking, how best can we ensure that there's solar, there's solar energy in some of the communities that we're working, such that they can connect the mobile phones that they have. How do we ensure that they have smartphones that can, with WhatsApp or these social media apps, that we can utilize to ensure that we remotely deliver our trainings, we remotely conduct dialogue sessions with some of the actors and peace builders that we work with at community level. So we are trying to, we are in negotiation, we are negotiating with our funding partners to see how best they can support this work, and I'm positive that we are going to get there.
Thank you anyway, and it's so great to hear how positive you're feeling. So moving on in the vein of two similar questions, we have got a question from Emma, who wants to know whether you find that women in Zimbabwe transform conflict in a unique or a distinctive way, different from that of men, and do they have a particular set of skills or an approach? And what can we as peace builders around the world learn from that? And in a related question, Katrina would like to know whether Envision, the women of Envision, carve out a specific niche within the districts in which they work, or whether they have a specific gender-centric analysis of the work that you do. Yeah, I think that's both of them.
Okay. Thank you, Oscar. In terms of, so one of the things that has really changed my view. I talked about being, growing up, being very interested in human rights, and working with women has really changed the way I view peace building. So when I joined Envision Zimbabwe, one of the things that my board of trustees told me was, we have a women's way of doing things here. So I didn't understand that, as a man, and when Envision Zimbabwe says we have a women's way of doing things, is this idea that women have a different approach to, in fact, responding to violence, and the way they engage when it comes to peace building. So I'll give an example. So one of the projects that we have, we are one of the few organizations that actually work with the police in Zimbabwe. And the police in Zimbabwe is I think, one of the most hated institutions, given the human rights violations that have happened over the years. So just building a relationship with that organization has been tough for an organization, for us as an organization. And also it explains why there's very few NGOs, human rights organizations, that have been able to establish relationships with the police. So as a women's rights organization, our entry, our bridge to this very difficult institution were the female police officers. So we managed to, to build a relationship with the Zimbabwe Public Police. And one of the things that they wanted us to work on was on women's rights, training the female police officers on women's rights and gender equality. So when we worked with these women, we had an opportunity to see how they interact with the community. One of the things, the feedback that we got is that, whenever we go and engage with the community, female police officers have a better relationship with communities. The skills that were impacted on these women, these female police officers, some of whom have to deal with the gender-based violence. We discovered that whenever a female police officer goes and responds to domestic violence, the chances of her, achieving, just sitting down with the conflicting parties at household level and, having almost like addressing the conflict at that level were higher than when a male police officer goes in there, So that dynamic also plays out at community level, where we have trained, I think, over 600 female peace builders. And these women are the ambassadors, they are our peace ambassadors at community level. And because women are viewed as less threatening, they are the ones, they are viewed as they are more likely to bring people together. So our female peace builders at community level have been able to build bridges, between various conflicting parties at community level, including political actors. So that I think then means that I think we need more. We need to put more resources into ensuring that there are more women in peace building, taking positions, being at the forefront of leading peace initiatives. So that I think has really set Envision Zimbabwe apart from all the other women's rights organizations in Zimbabwe.
Great, thanks anyway. The time is getting away from us, so I'm going to have to move swiftly on to the last couple of questions. So one of the final questions that we've got is from Karen, who would like to know that as somebody that seeks to encourage others to support both Peace Direct and our local partners such as Envision, she would like to know if you would be able to give us a feel for how far $100 could go in supporting the work of Envision in Zimbabwe and in the regions in which you work.
Thank you, Oscar. So $100 will go very far in achieving, or supporting the work that we do at community level. So Envision Zimbabwe works with volunteers, and whenever we are at community level, there's often there are these individuals who are so dedicated, who are so committed to ensuring that there is peace in their communities, because they've realized that if there's no peace, they will not be able to put food on their table. So, $100, if you were to go at community level, that $100 will be able to assist in these volunteers to travel between villages, to have food or refreshments, when they are moving around, promoting peace, promoting women's rights, gender equality. They are able to have a bit of to have food. They are able to put credit into their mobile phones that they use to coordinate, and also to find out from the other members, for example, on the peace committees, um, uh, they are able to put credit to stay in touch with Envision Zimbabwe. And if there's anything that happens, they want technical support, or they want to get in touch with service providers. For example, they want the police to respond to violence when it happens within their communities. So $100 will go a long way. One of the things that has happened to Zimbabwe is that with the collapse of the economy, and the local currency, our Zimbabwe dollar, having depreciated so much, $100, will go a long way if you are to do an activity, or you are going to go to the community and try to support, these female peace builders when they are moving around. So I think every dollar helps, every cent helps when it comes to mobilizing resources to support the work that we do.
Thank you so much. Anyway, I'm going to jump in because I know our time is short, and Oscar is going to help follow up on other questions with you later on. But we want to respect the time, and we always have one last question in our peace talks, which is, how do you have advice for everyone how to be peace builders in our own communities, and how best to support you and your work and the work of Envision and all the women who are leading it?
My advice is that whenever you think of peace building, think of the most basic needs that a human being wants or needs to survive. Be it water, be it the right to shelter, be it going to school, the right to education, and for women and the girl child, think about the right to education as a girl child, the right to health, those basic needs. You talk about economic, social, and cultural rights, civil and political rights, all those things. If you are addressing those things, if your organization or as an individual, you have a way of addressing those things, then you are doing peace building. Because peace building is about how we live, is about how we ensure that there's development, is how we ensure that there are safety nets for the most vulnerable groups in our community. So that's the advice that I'll give. Peace building is all encompassing, and whenever you have an opportunity to support the work in peace building, it goes a long way, in making the work that we do a success.
Thank you so much anyway. It's been wonderful to talk to you. I just want to give you a great appreciation for being here and taking time with us, and turn it over to Oscar to wrap us up.
Thank you so much, both. And thank you again anyway. It's been a real pleasure, and I feel like I've learned so much about the work, and I've been around at Peace Direct for a while, so still so much to learn. Yeah, so just to confirm to everyone that was worried that we didn't get around to your question, we will be following up within the next week, so keep an eye out from an email from me. I'm sure I'll be pestering you at some point anyway, so keep an eye out as well. And also just to say that we at Peace Direct have continued our important work supporting local peace builders throughout this pandemic, and the heroic peace builders we support are all doing their best to carry on their life-saving work. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and to sign up for our emails to keep updated on future events just like this and everything else that we're up to. And just to say that we really appreciate you being with us today and wish you the very best during these challenging times. So thank you very much for being with us, and good afternoon, good night, or good morning, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Bridget. And thank you, everyone that supports peace building in the world.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.